All right. Hi, I'm David Feldman, and this is the mop up for March 30th, 2023. Donald Trump, after becoming the first president ever to be impeached twice, now becomes the first president in American history to be criminally indicted. All I can say is it's about time. It's about time Trump was indicted, and it's about time we here in America started indicting our presidents. The indictment is said to have caught Trump by surprise in what seemed like a feint and then a misdirection. It was announced just yesterday that the Manhattan grand jury, looking into Donald Trump's hush payment scheme to silence porn star Stormy Daniels, was taking a month off. Nobody was expecting an indictment today. Trump even announced earlier this week that no charges were going to be filed from the Manhattan DA. Adding to the shock of tonight's indictment was Alvin Bragg. He's the Manhattan DA. Adding to the shock of all this was that Alvin Bragg announced earlier this morning that he was expanding the scope of his investigation to look into Trump's attempts to silence another woman that Trump reportedly had sex with. The implication behind all of this was more work had to be done before an indictment was handed down. But surprise, surprise, prosecutors filed the indictment at around 5 p.m. Eastern on Thursday evening, roughly 3 hours after the grand jury began meeting again. We thought they were on a vacation for a month. The Manhattan DA is reportedly negotiating right now with the Secret Service on the logistics of bringing Donald Trump into a New York State courthouse where Trump will be fingerprinted, and of course, a mugshot will be taken. Let me just say that again. Donald Trump will be fingerprinted, and a mugshot will be taken. At this point, the indictment is sealed, so we have no idea what the former president has been charged with. But we are almost certain it will revolve around falsifying business records to hide fixer Michael Cohen's payment of roughly $130,000 back in 2016, weeks before the presidential election, roughly $130,000 to buy the silence of porn star Stormy Daniels. Falsifying business records is said to be a charge that can stick. The Manhattan DA has won countless convictions on that one in the past year. Some say that if Bragg, however, tries to tie Trump to a campaign finance violation, where the hush money is seen as an illegal campaign contribution, well, then Bragg could be attempting to prosecute Trump on charges that could be thrown out of court by a judge more sympathetic to Donald Trump. With several criminal indictments now pending in Fulton County, Georgia, perhaps, and Washington, D.C., Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg has become the first prosecutor to come forward with an actual indictment of Donald Trump or any president in American history. Now, according to the New York Times, Trump could only be barred from running for office had he been convicted in one of his two impeachment trials, and he was not convicted. He has declared his candidacy. He's running for president in 2024. The Times also says that Texas Governor Rick Perry ran for president in 2016, having been indicted for abuse of power down in Texas. And in 1920, as most of my listeners already know, socialist Eugene Debs, serving time for violating the Espionage Act, ran for president from jail. It is our Justice Department's official policy not to offer up a criminal indictment of a sitting president. The Supreme Court ruled in the Bill Clinton-Paula Jones trial, however, that a sitting president can be tried in a civil court. Donald Trump is not a sitting president, so he is open for a criminal indictment as well as several civil lawsuits that are now pending. For more on this, we are joined by the Reverend Barry W. Lynn, whose new book, Paid to Piss People Off, will be released on April Fool's Day. The Reverend Barry W. Lynn is a lawyer, a member of the Supreme Court Bar, as well as an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ. For nearly a quarter of a century, the Reverend Barry W. Lynn ran Americans United for separation of church and state. He joins us today from Massachusetts. Hello, Reverend.
Hello, nice to be back with you.
Were you surprised that Trump was indicted today?
I really was not surprised by it, although there was certainly the evidence that you presented of Bragg making an announcement that he might be considering a second woman who may have been given hush money, and presumably that's the Playboy playmate who has said that she too had sex with Donald Trump. But it's not surprising because you want to get this information out. You want it to be a surprise because you don't want people waiting around for a day or 2 days planning what they're going to do to respond to it. And I think it's more to make this difficult to organize around than anything else, that they were kind of playing footsie about this until it actually happened.
Right. So there are two, we don't really know what he's been indicted for, correct?
That's correct. And he will appear. I'd be very surprised if his lawyers, who are, better lawyers, arguably, than the ones he's had in the past, would not have already worked out exactly what will happen Tuesday or Wednesday of next week when he shows up in New York and is, as you noted, fingerprinted, a mugshot taken, and presumably bail set.
Right. Now we're getting reports, I don't know if you heard, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, where Donald Trump makes his home over at Mar-a-Lago, we're getting reports that if Trump doesn't volunteer to surrender, Ron DeSantis says he will not cooperate with an extradition request. And that would be in direct violation of the Constitution. Isn't he obligated? Ron DeSantis is I think he's a Harvard Law School graduate.
Yeah, so, he is.
Well, so then he probably doesn't know about Article 4, Section 2 of the Constitution.
No, that whole thing about, and I don't think he really, it's hard for me, and I think for many people to believe that Ron DeSantis, went anywhere beyond maybe middle school. But the truth is he knows enough, he should know enough, and he certainly cannot be serious that he would not.
Well, we're just getting word that Ron DeSantis has just banned the U.S. Constitution in Florida. That's the latest book to be banned. What happens if the governor of Florida, hypothetically, refuses to cooperate with the Manhattan DA? Then New York goes down to Florida and grabs him. But
yes.
Is that how it works?
That is what would happen in this unlikely scenario. I don't think that's going to happen because I think Donald Trump, above all other interests now, is how can I use this with that 30% of Republicans who want me in power again? Because in the event that he doesn't end up being indicted or he doesn't show up on his own volition, he loses the ability to say, I've always been telling the truth. Stormy Daniels, I never even heard of her. And he loses all that if he fights a truly no-win proposition of simply saying, I refuse to leave Mar-a-Lago, come in, with the weapons like this is Waco.
Or Scarface.
He can't do that. Or Scarface, which I haven't seen for many, many years. I should watch it again.
I'm hoping it's more of a Scarface situation. A man can pray, right,
I can
Reverend?
see it. Yes, you can absolutely do that.
What kind? Go ahead.
No, I mean, ever since this indictment came down and started to hit the wire services around 5 o'clock Eastern, everybody that talks about it, whether they're on CNN or the Fox News channel, they always talk about how this is unprecedented. That means absolutely nothing in a court of law. Even if it was uniquely unprecedented, it would still have no meaning. It's historical. That's all it is. It has no implications at all in the treatment or the likely journey of this indictment.
So, what can the Republicans actually do to protect Donald Trump? First of all, do you think they really want to protect him? Do you think Ron DeSantis is Ron DeSantis happy that Trump has been
Well,
indicted?
no, I don't think so. He shouldn't be because, in fact, no Republican who has an interest in running during the Republican primary has an interest in preserving this character, Donald Trump. Because if he has 30% of the votes in primaries, and we know that his supporters are, shall we say, more fully supportive than the supporters of most other candidates, he will do so well in so many Republican primaries that there's shots of a DeSantis, of a Pompeo, of Chris Christie declines precipitously. The best thing for them is for Donald Trump somehow to end up going away. If he is emboldened and the supporters are emboldened by what happens in this, when this grand jury venture eventually gets started. By the way, it doesn't start the next day. It could be months and months before any legal proceedings occur. Donald Trump's lawyers will spend a lot of time with all kinds of motions. They will move for summary judgment, which means that we'll file some papers, and then the judge will look at the papers and say, "Well, you don't really have a case."
So, in
This does happen.
summary judgment would be ruling in favor of Trump, saying, for example, the indictment over the payment to Stormy Daniels being a contribution in kind. It's not an illegal campaign contribution. I'm throwing this charge out. That would be, a judge would do that
would
in a summary judgment.
Not necessarily, but certainly a judge would have the power to do that. But this idea that is terribly difficult prosecution to make, I am not sure that, I'm quite sure I don't agree with that, because we have to remember what this is. In New York, there is no state law that says you can't pay some money to anyone to not tell someone else about anything, not even a crime. But if you indict for the misdemeanor of falsifying business records, which, as you pointed out, the district attorney is really good at that, it is generally speaking only a misdemeanor, only a misdemeanor. In order to make it a felony for this filing false records, you have to link it to something else. So you have to prove to the jury, or first to the judge and then to the jury, that the payment of $130,000 should be viewed as an improper donation to Trump's presidential campaign. And this is where a lot of commentators say, well, that's going to be very difficult to prove. I don't think so, because I think if you have evidence from people, not just Michael Cohen, who is a somewhat flawed witness, but I'll get to that in a minute. But if there's evidence that Donald Trump knew how damaging this would be, not just for his relationship with Melania, because there's a lot of reports that she already knew about this, but what about for his supporters? I think most of us remember when the famous Access Hollywood tape came out, and Trump is there talking about grabbing women by the peas, and
watch it there, Reverend.
That would true. Yeah, well, that's why I didn't want to get too graphic, but no. So
hang on for one second.
So that's
whenever I have the Reverend on.
It's very difficult to shock me.
Right.
But here's what's going to happen. That he could get away with, because as many religious right leaders said at the time, Donald Trump, he's not running to be the pastor of our church. This may have been a failing, but it was a long time ago. This is much more difficult to explain away by any corruption of Christian theology. And I think Trump knew that. And Trump thought, if this all comes out a matter of weeks before the election, this, my good Christian supporters, will not accept. And it could cost me the election. If they can demonstrate that that's a fear that he had, then this paying of the hush money has a major impact on election laws. And these, remember, are not federal election laws. These are state election laws. And I think that a jury in New York would be much more likely to successfully convict if they can find evidence that he knew that disclosure of the Stormy Daniels situation would crater his candidacy in the last few weeks.
Interesting thing about jurisdiction that I found confusing. It is a federal election. He's running for president, and yet campaign contributions to a presidential campaign can fall under the jurisdiction of the Manhattan DA because the crime took place in Manhattan.
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, we thought that was the case during the famous Al Gore, George Bush conflagration. Everybody that thought they had read the Constitution thought the state law in Florida was what should ultimately govern. But if at the last minute, when it gets to the Supreme Court, all of a sudden they have federalized what should have been a state law matter. And now the question is, what if any effect would this have on the Trump situation? But I think Bragg as a DA has a complete authority to treat this, and it should be treated as a state offense, looking at the elements that you have to prove for a conviction in the state of New York.
Okay, I don't mean to belabor this, but in my estimation, not knowing anything, he broke a federal law, a federal campaign finance law that Merrick Garland decided not to prosecute Trump for. I'm surprised that a Manhattan DA can prosecute a president using a federal law. Can you?
No, well, no. My understanding that the most likely thing is that there is this law, a state law in the state of New York. Most states don't have them, that reflects upon the way in which contributions can be made in any campaign that's occurring in the state of New York.
I see. So, by the way, we don't know yet. I don't think I'm looking at the proverbial wire. We don't know what the charges are. I'd like to think, since I'm rooting for Alvin Bragg, Manhattan DA, that he's going to surprise us. That he certainly surprised me today. I didn't think an indictment would be coming down for at least another month. Is this perhaps part of a larger case that the Attorney General, Letitia James, is prosecuting statewide? Falsifying business records getting him under oath on falsifying business records could assist the Attorney General in her civil lawsuit against Trump, the way he inflated what he was worth when he was looking for a loan and then deflated what he was worth when he was paying his taxes.
Right. Yeah, it's possible, but in that civil case you're talking about, I don't believe he's a defendant in any of the counts in that case. The corporations are, but I don't think Donald Trump personally has been charged with any civil or criminal violation by Letitia James.
Right.
I don't think so. I don't know. So, yeah, I think the bigger question is whether there's been any kind of collaboration between the Justice Department, the Georgia judiciary, and Merrick Garland over the evidence in this case. the Justice Department says unequivocally, we did not do that. We have never shared evidence nor received evidence from the district attorney in Manhattan. And I kind of believe that to be the case. I don't think there's been this collusion at all. And I think it just means whatever Mr. Bragg has on Donald Trump is probably all he's going to get. He is not going to be able to take some kind of evidence from another proceeding and piggyback it on what's going on in the next few months or years.
Right.
In this. Yeah.
It's my understanding that this was a special grand jury. This investigation has been going on for 5 years. I think there are 23 people sitting on that jury. I don't know if they've been sitting, I don't know how long they've been sitting there. What is the protocol? Does the Manhattan DA, is he allowed to ignore a grand jury's indictment? Does he go before the grand jury and ask for the indictment? Does he ask for the vote? How does that work? I know you're a member of the Supreme Court bar and you're an attorney. This may be a little too deep into Manhattan's legal system.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I know, but I can do what most people do on CNN. It's speculate.
Right.
You're right. It's a 23-member grand jury, and unlike many states, the only thing you need in order to indict in New York is to have 12 members of that 23-member grand jury. And in fact, you have to have only 16 of the 23 people physically present to hear evidence. In other words, that becomes the quorum for the continuation of work by the grand jury. In other states, you've got to get near unanimity, but in New York, it's 12 out of 23.
Right. What powers do the Republicans in Washington, D.C. have to disrupt this case? I know that the horrible, execrable, I don't know if I pronounced execrable properly, but Jim Jordan, who is chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, he has threatened to drag Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg before his committee. Has that ever happened before? And
I don't think it's ever happened. And Jim Jordan, who I testified before many, many times when he was not the chairman, when Jerry Nadler was the chairman, and he was a doofus. I mean, the guy really didn't understand anything. It almost makes you believe that he maybe didn't know that his wrestlers were being sexually abused by a doctor while he was the coach of the wrestling team. I mean, maybe he's so kind of dead that he didn't even notice that. But seriously, he ran a committee hearing today in which he had two witnesses favorable to the position that he was holding on an issue I've already forgotten. The Democrats, he then dismissed them. Democrats objected and said, wait a minute, we get a chance to also ask questions of these witnesses. And Jordan basically said, no, you don't. And then they yelled at each other for a while, and then he just gavelled the committee hearing to an end.
Right.
He will do anything. Will he try this? Of course he will. Is he going to be successful? Almost every time Jim Jordan, since the Republicans took over the Congress or the House, almost every time he's gone on Fox and they ask him, what are you going to do tomorrow? And he said, it's going to be powerful testimony.
Right.
It's never powerful testimony, but he's going to continue to do it because Jim Jordan represents a district in Ohio that literally, I mean, there must be Democrats who live there, but not very many. I mean, he is one of the safest Republican seats in Congress.
Right. Last question, and then I want to bring up your book and the special office hours book club event that we're doing Friday night. So, as I said at the top of this segment, Governor Ron DeSantis has said he will not cooperate with the Manhattan DA. So, what happens if Donald Trump resists arrest? What is the role that the Secret Service plays in all this. We're in uncharted territory. There's never been a president before who's been indicted
Yeah.
criminally, and the Secret Service is supposed to protect his body, but are they constitutionally bound to protect him from being arrested by
No,
do they
no.
cooperate with the Manhattan DA? What is their
Yeah,
obligation?
I would think that their obligation is in fact to cooperate with whatever law enforcement authorities are sent by the DA in Manhattan down to Florida if it comes to that. I personally do not think it will come to that because, as I mentioned earlier, I think Donald Trump wants his followers to see see his mugshot, see him walk in, perhaps saying a few words about the witch hunt again. He thinks that it will raise him vast amounts of money, and I don't think he's wrong. I think
Right.
the best thing for fundraising, leave Florida, walk in, make a comment before you get into the courtroom and afterwards, and just hope those 30% of people that supported you yesterday will still support you on Tuesday or Wednesday of next week when all this happens.
The Reverend Barry W. Lynn, you, for nearly a quarter of a century, ran Americans United for Separation of Church and State. You have been battling the evangelicals in this country since you graduated from law school.
That's
So,
true.
if Donald Trump had called you in 2016 and said, Reverend, you know the evangelicals, you know Graham and Falwell and
Yeah.
all the other sons of God. Uh, I've
Mhm.
got this porn star who I had sex with.
Yep.
I can't lose my evangelical base. Am I
Yep.
going to lose them? Should I pay her the 130? I hope I'm getting the number right, but should I pay her $130,000, or do you think the evangelicals will forgive me? Because they would. I mean, looking back, they would have forgiven him,
Yeah.
right?
No, I'm not so sure of that. I think there's a distinction between forgiving him for making his comments about women's genitals, but I don't think that would translate into them forgiving him for his conduct with Stormy
But
Daniels. I
looking
really
back,
don't.
but
Because
Reverend,
yeah,
not to, I don't mean to be rude, but he has not lost the evangelical base. Has maybe a little. I mean, no matter what he does, they seem to stick with him.
I think though there is, first of all, as a Protestant, uh, if he wanted to be forgiven, uh, what he should do and should have done, if he thought this was going to lose votes, which he didn't, would be to publicly do what Jimmy Swaggart, the evangelist, caught with a hooker in a Louisiana hotel room. He would have done what that evangelical pastor did the first time he was caught: cry, plead for forgiveness. What Jimmy Swaggart did not do the second time, he shut up. He said, I'm not doing any press conferences. I'm not crying again. And that's when Swaggart started to lose real support. This is not the kind of, the woman wrote an entire book about this. If you're a Catholic, a Roman Catholic in this country, and you fall short of what you should be doing, it's okay to go to the local priest or the bishop of your jurisdiction and say you're sorry to him. That's all that Catholics expect. But for Protestants, they expect you to go down, grovel, plead, weep before they'll forgive you. But then they often do. And I think this, whatever the conduct was, with the people at the, that Billy Bush was talking about on that tape, with the Access Hollywood tape, whatever it was, I think there were so many people who also claimed to be Christian legislators who said things like, grabbing someone, that's not an assault. In
Right.
other words, they would redefine it. And a lot of these not so good Christian evangelicals will buy that. They will listen to that and they will say, son of a gun, because they wouldn't say it louder than that or with another word.
Right.
I guess he's okay. He's being supported by all these people I like so much who are in the halls of Congress.
Well, you've been very generous with your time. I want to talk about the special event we're doing tomorrow night. We've been talking with the Reverend Barry W. Lynn. Besides being an attorney and a member of the Supreme Court Bar, he is an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ and has dedicated most of his career and life running Americans United for separation of church and state, taking on members of his own religious community and members of my religious community to tell them to just butt out, stay out of this. We don't, you're this is not what our founding fathers wanted. You have worked diligently. I can't think of anybody who has worked harder to keep religion out of the public square. The Reverend Barry W. Lynn has written a book. It comes out April Fool's Day. It's entitled Paid to Piss People Off. And it's a trilogy of 3 books. And Friday night at 8 p.m., from 8 till 9, we're going to do a book launch of the book Porn, which is book 2 of your trilogy. Is that correct?
That is correct. I will mention to people tomorrow where that title came from. I was originally actually going to call it The Fellowship of the Rings, but then some character wrote a book with that name before I got to use it. So I had to change it. And luckily, a high school student helped me out.
Yeah, but you have fought for the rights of Wiccans and witches and porn stars.
Yes, I have. And I don't want to give too much away, but I will remind particularly people who remember that my spouse, Joanne, Dr. Lynn, I used to get calls from women in the adult industry occasionally at home, and they had all kinds of issues, often not even related to their profession. And I would talk to them. And Joanne said to me one day after a phone call, she said, Barry, if you weren't defending their rights, they wouldn't give you the time of day. So more stories tomorrow.
I love the idea of you're married to a doctor, but you're the one who wants to go out and do house calls.
See, I never did that.
Yeah.
But you should ask me tomorrow if there was ever a time when I got curious enough not to do anything, but to go to some event where who knows what activity would be occurring. If you remember, ask me that question.
I will.
And I was talking to a reporter the other day about a comment which I'll talk about tomorrow. And she said, do you watch the news anymore? And if so, what do you think of it? And when you hear a discussion of the separation in church and state, do you think I could do a lot better than that?
Right.
And the latter is not true, but the former is. I am obsessed with news. I care about it. I just wish we had more of it.
Right.
That is to say, good news.
Well, today we had some good news. Today is good.
We did.
News. Yeah. Let me plug tomorrow.
It's good news. Go ahead.
Let me plug to our listeners right now. Go to the description of this episode. If you're listening to this or watching this, in the description is a Zoom link to office hours, Friday night at 8 p.m. We will start at 8 p.m. And all you need is, you don't even need Zoom. There's a link. You click on that link. It's free. You can, if you don't have Zoom, you'll be provided phone numbers. You can listen in via phone. And we will talk to the Reverend Barry W. Lynn about not just pornography and his work taking on the Meese Commission and protecting the rights of pornographers. We will talk about the true meaning of the First Amendment, because a lot of us forget that the First Amendment is just not about freedom of speech. The First Amendment is freedom from religion, the Establishment Clause. And Americans need to get this drummed into their tiny little brains that the First Amendment and the Establishment Clause specifically says, take your religion in Washington. When you walk into the Capitol, take your religious ideas and put them where the sun don't shine. And I'm not talking about Seattle. That is the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. Nobody cares what your religion is. Shut up about it when you're in the temple of democracy. And we're going to talk about the First Amendment, and I'll keep trying to talk about pornography if you'll indulge me in your work. So go to the description of this episode. The link is there. It's free. We're going to talk about the Reverend's new book. It comes out April Fool's Day, Paid to Piss People Off. What a great title for a book. And if you can't see the link, go to my website, hit office hours. The link will take you there. Or if you subscribe to my newsletter, it will have the link in there. Get to meet and see and talk to the Reverend, and maybe he'll do. You don't do faith healing, right?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Can you fake it?
Yeah, but anything else?
You can't
anything
fake
else? I don't. Yeah, I don't exorcise demons.
None
either,
of that
but,
stuff. Oh, okay.
But I did meet. I've met several times the woman who was the stunt double for the woman who played Reagan in the original Exorcist. She's a very short woman.
Linda Blair.
They wanted to hire her. Well, they wanted to hire her to be Linda Blair's stunt double because Linda Blair was a bit too young to engage in certain activities, one in particular involving a crucifix.
Yes.
And that's all we're going to say.
Okay.
But she's a delightful woman that was a stunt double.
Did you ever think
Linda Blair?
Did you ever think you would live long enough when Linda Blair would not be the most satanic person? That Tony Blair would be the real Satan? Tony Blair is Satan.
But yeah, I'll be looking into that.
Yeah,
I'll be looking into that. I must attend another Zoom on another matter.
Goodbye.
But I will. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you. That's the Reverend Barry W. Lynn, a gift to the universe. I cannot stress this enough. Come join us Friday night, March 31st at 8 p.m. Eastern for office hours. The Reverend Barry W. Lynn will be discussing porn. I think that's book 2 in his trilogy, Paid to Piss People Off. And then we will have my old friend, comedian John Ross, will stop by and we'll record an episode of my podcast. So if you'd like to watch us record the podcast, you'll stick around after the Reverend Barry W. Lynn leaves, and it's all free. It's all on Zoom, and you can dial in and watch and listen and join the conversation. Get to meet the Reverend Barry W. Lynn. We'll take your questions. So please do that. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. The only reason you're listening to me right now or watching this is because a friend of yours copied and then pasted the link of an episode of mine and shared it on social media or through email. So if you enjoyed this, please share it. That's the best way to help me. Please like this. It helps a lot. If you like this, hit the like button and leave comments. I don't answer all the comments. I read every comment. Longtime listeners know that I read every comment because the comments bleed into the show. You can tell that the topics we discuss are informed by the comments. Please subscribe to this. It helps if you subscribe. I think that covers everything. Go to my website, davidfeldmanshow.com, and subscribe to my newsletter. It comes out every Friday night. The link for office hours is either in the description to this episode, or you can find it in my newsletter or over at my website. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Rotten hell, Donald Trump and your entire family of malingerers.